Hello everyone, my name is Andy B. I'm a journalist and a podcast host. I have my own podcast show since spring this year. I have my own fashion podcast series where I do interviews with fashion designers. Since I already have an audience in Transylvania, I'm trying to expand my brand. I'm very happy to announce I will do podcast episodes in English as well. My latest guest is Aaron Roberts, photographer. I worked with him in the past and he is very talented. In our podcast discussion, I asked him about his career, ambition, and creativity. Stay tuned. I would like to introduce you, Aaron. Hello.
Hi, hello there.
Tell us a bit about yourself. How did you start working in photography?
So it's a combination of being creative and being lazy. For me, when I was young, I used to go into a lot of abandoned buildings and explore them. And part of that, I used to go in with a video camera with some friends, and I actually still have the VHS cassette here. I actually picked it up this year back from England and brought it over to Romania for me to get it converted. So we used to go around in these abandoned buildings and I used to film everything. And then I used to edit these videos in a very, very basic way using PowerPoint for credits and literally filming a television screen to get the credits onto a cassette. And I loved it. So it sort of sparked an interest in media for me, and I went into studying media at college in Bristol and did well, did just fine, but it became apparent to me that the editing process, although fun, it was very, very long, and I sort of kind of winded that down a bit. But what I didn't stop doing was going into abandoned buildings. But instead of taking videos, I was taking pictures. And then once upon a time, some guy asked me, hey, this is a nice picture. And it was a picture of the inside of an abandoned church. He asked me, how much would you sell it for? And I said, well, why would I sell it? You can just take the picture. It's fine. No, I want to buy it. Okay, £5. So I sold this picture to him for £5 and didn't think much of it. And then it became apparent to me that, this actually is not just a way to make money, but it's something I very much enjoy. And the process of getting through the edits is a lot faster than video. And so my direction skewed much more towards photography than towards video. And that's pretty much how I started getting into photography and started taking it quite seriously after that.
So it really started as a hobby and then it kind of turned into a professional career.
Yes. In fact, it was more of an accident, right? I was just taking pictures because I liked taking pictures of these abandoned buildings. Lots of them people have never seen the insides of, and wanted to share them, and it just sort of became a thing. And a lot of my early work actually was that of taking pictures of building and urban landscapes more than people.
I see. And was it an obvious career choice for you, or was it a hobby? Was anything else that you wanted to do as a career next to photography?
I mean, I'm very diverse in a lot of things I've done and still do. Like I said, initially I started out doing video stuff and filming things and I had a few, and I've still got the pictures, should we call them movie posters? I wanted to create a few movies when I was a kid. But yeah, it's very, very hard to get that sort of group of people together and focus. So again, it didn't move. But, I've worked in various different fields. I worked for Apple when I was in the UK. So I've worked in the field of technology, which I very much love. And technology is a huge part of my life, even today. Even if it was a pretty basic role, I was in a retail position in one of their Apple stores. But that went on to more technical roles. And then eventually I started building websites and fixing, devices and all sorts of things. But certainly photography for me has been an anchor. It's been very consistent. And it's, 10 plus years at this point, started in 2010. So what are we, 13 years at this stage? So it's very much a constant. So as much as it's a career, it's still very much a passion. And I mix it among my jobs and my other things that I still do today. So.
I see. How were your early professional works as a photographer next to the abandoned building pictures?
So, yeah, so I mean, we could take that into two chunks, right? We have the images that were taken of the buildings, and yeah, I mean, those, I clearly, even looking at my earliest works, some of those works, I think, well, I really did have a good understanding of composition, right?
Yeah.
And building upon my photography is that, you know, this sense of instant gratification and satisfaction from taking pictures. I wanted to share those pictures immediately, and obviously social media and everything came along, and it was a big deal to get things published there. But nothing for me beat taking pictures of people, which was something I sort of fell into also. And so for me, the earliest works I did, and again, this would have been, I could probably put some dates to it. In fact, my portfolio website is dated, like literally from when the pictures were taken. So I know for a fact I could. But ultimately, taking pictures of people, it was very experimental at first. So, you know, I was understanding composition I'd pretty much got, but understanding lighting and how it affects the images, understanding, you know, kind of different focal lengths, understanding what bokeh was and how to do it. And let's just be clear, at this point, I wasn't working with a professional DSLR. I wasn't working with a DSLR at all. Mm-hmm. At the very earliest stages, I was working with a point and shoot Nikon Coolpix. I think it was an L100, which is, you know, you can't take the lenses off. You had 0 to no control over aperture or any of the exposure values. You had some control, but not much. So my work there was very, very experimental. Lighting, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So you didn't control most of the work because you couldn't change the lens of the camera.
So I have pictures, right, from what I would consider my earliest studio setup, which was a white blind, like a window blind on the wall. And because I didn't understand how to light correctly back then, but I had to experiment, I actually had like a lamp behind the blind so that the background would be very white and bright. And overexposed would be the correct term to use. And then the model, or whoever I was taking pictures of, would be obviously in front of that blind. And the background would be pure white. And that for me was how to get a white background back then. And then I soon realized when I picked up a proper DSLR, which was a Nikon D3100, D3100, and that's still an entry-level camera. Yeah, that wasn't going to work anymore. I really had to understand the fundamentals of lighting and technique. And so my earliest works are very grainy, very, very low resolution, with some really cringy editing, right? Selective colorization. That's such a thing that every photographer seems to start out with. It's okay, let's make this thing red and everything else black and white. You know? So there's a bunch of pictures, and I'll be honest, I think some of those pictures they're still out there on my website because some of them made the cut. But we're talking JPEGs, right? There's not much you can do with it.
Amazing. You have your own website as well, like you mentioned, and clients can choose different type of sessions. Which photo sessions requires the most work? Which one is the most difficult?
So I think on location, so I kind of break them up into different kind of categories. Really, groups are very difficult. So I don't do weddings, right? I don't do weddings at all, and there's a good reason for that. The first wedding I ever did in England, it went well, by the way. Nothing went wrong with it. But the night before, I had, you know, literally nightmares. I was sweating. I was freaking out about what I was going to do. I thought, I was dreaming that I was missing the shots. So for me, the most challenging is working with groups of people because there's a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of things riding on your success there. Plus, when I moved to Romania in 2013, there was an obvious language barrier, right? So groups of people were kind of out of the question, especially where there's a diverse age range. But working on what I have today in terms of the selections I do, which are, you know, studio individual shoots through to small groups of 5, family, friends, etc., and outdoors. I'd say that outdoors is probably the more challenging because you still have to, there's a lot of other factors, right? When you're in the studio, you have a lot of control over lighting. So really the results are guaranteed depending on the subject is comfortable, which is something I spend a lot of time doing, is making them comfortable. But yeah, outside that can be the challenge, right? Because you have other people, you have environmental factors that you have to take into account. But generally speaking, things are pretty okay these days.
I see. And which one do you prefer most, the studio or outdoor pictures? Which one results more in a high quality?
So for me, I mean, in terms of quality, again, that can be broken down into two different things. You can look at compositional quality. Well, to be honest, the studio is pretty basic, right? You've got a background, you've got some lights, and you can play around with those. Outside, you have an awful lot more you can play with. So if I had a favorite, what I do prefer to work in the studio. Firstly, because there are not too many photographers that have access to their own studio. And that's sort of an edge that I like to give myself and give my clients, is that option. But also, from an outside perspective, get more creative. But technically, quality, from a technical term, studio images are always going to be a lot sharper and a lot more detailed than maybe outside, because you have a lot of control over the technical aspects of taking the picture.
Yeah, and outside you can have just other annoying things.
Yeah, you always find to kind of get people that just want to walk directly in front of your camera when it's very clear you're taking a session. But also, it's, from the model's perspective, it can be challenging, right? Because there's a lot of people, maybe they are not experienced working outside, and so finding a good spot and just letting those pictures kind of roll out through the shutter that can take a minute or two to get into. Whereas in the studio, it's usually, okay, we're ready to go.
Yeah, it's much more easier, and you can just set things right on time.
Right. And in fact, I know my studio settings off by top of my head. In fact, I lease my studio from time to time, and I always tell my photographers that are using the studio what the best settings are, at least to get a well-exposed picture.
You worked many times with models, like you mentioned. What are the key elements that you need to pay attention to at a photo shoot with a model?
So it's not always about look. So a lot of people always say, oh wow, you've worked with so many beautiful ladies, or some really good-looking guys, etc. How do you find them? It's not a matter of finding it. People kind of find you, right?
Yeah.
So people reach out and they kind of reach out to you and say, hey, I've seen some of your work and what can you do? And of course, the work they see is what I consider to be some of the best work I've done, which is what I publish on my websites. But when you're starting to work with somebody, you have to take into, some of the questions I ask them straight off the bat is, is this your first session? Have you ever been in a studio before? Just to kind of set some foundation, understand their position, how comfortable they are, whether this is something totally new to them, kind of explain to them a little bit about what's going on. And then understanding their comfort level is probably the most important part of taking the session. There's nothing you want less than someone who's uncomfortable or doesn't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So usually the first 10, 15 minutes, maybe sometimes more, can just be chit-chat, right? Just getting to know people, getting to know the other person. And half the time I'm taking pictures and they don't even notice. And that's sort of an art, right?
Yeah.
Take pictures, they don't know you're taking the pictures, and the pictures they get are very natural. Sometimes that's not required, right? You need very specific shoots. I've done a few fashion shoots where, articles of clothing have been involved. And you do have to say, kind of turn your side a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in here. I'm not catching your face in this one. So control over the session is in the hands of both. I don't like to dominate the session. I really like to let the model lead, and I will coach.
Yeah, so to make them feel comfortable is the key.
Right, 100%. Yeah.
You are getting more and more well known here in Transylvania. Did you find it hard to build a portfolio of clients here?
So, in a way, yes, and at other times, no. I think being British, and especially having studied media. So to give you some context here, so when you studied media, when I studied media in the UK, there was a lot of emphasis around location agreements, model release forms, permission, what you can and can't take pictures of in a public space. So coming to a foreign country, I was very intimidated because I don't know the rules. I had no idea what was going on at the time. And then there was the language barrier. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was initially pretty challenging. And I actually sort of, and there's also the fact that, typically having a foreign guy who doesn't speak your language approach you in any way and kind of ask you, hey, would you be interested in a shoot? It can kind of come across a bit strange. So there are, unfortunately, photographers that use their skill or sometimes just their cameras to gain access to people that they may otherwise not have access to. And unfortunately, there have been, I think, numerous cases where that has ended unfavorably, right? So somebody has pushed their limits a bit and made the client feel, or the model feel uncomfortable, or they've just been inappropriate. Trying to make sure that people realize that that's not my intention, and that I am not, I don't want to say a stereotypical photographer, right? But I'm not just a random guy trying to find a pretty girl or something to take pictures of. So I usually have to back that up with experience, and that's also very hard, right? When I was just moving here, I did have work, and I did have a website, and that was very important. But what is so important is word of mouth. And I guess I'll tell you a very short story about my experience in Târgu, because that's where I lived before moving to Cluj. I lived there for 1 year. What brought me there is a whole other story, but I'll just keep it into the photography topic for now. I started taking pictures of people. At the time I had my girlfriend, so she was helping me bridge that gap, right? Trying to make sure that people knew that I wasn't just a creep reaching out to them. Because Romania and, in this area in particular, there's a lot of beauty around here. And of course, you take pictures of people and it goes right back to that what got me into it is that sense of making them feel so good about these images, and they feel excited and they feel empowered. So as soon as you get someone to feel comfortable and happy and excited about the work, and then they share your work, it sort of grows organically from there. So I started taking pictures of events, and then through events you would meet more people, right? So you would end up taking pictures at somebody's, 18th birthday party, for example. And then through then you have a few other people that say, hey, I'm graduating school, right? And so word of mouth is very, very important. Then I moved to Cluj. So all of that kind of credibility I had built in Târgu Mureș, and, I won't call it a fan base, right? But, the reputation I created, I had to start from zero. But thankfully, because I already had built somewhat of a portfolio at that point, it was a bit easier for me to branch out. And I think people have been, I say, attracted to working with me because I'm foreign, right? So what I considered initially as being a risk actually turned out to be somewhat of an advantage. And I asked them, why me? I always ask them, why me? Why did you find me? How did you find me? Where did you find me? And why did you choose me? The answers are always, well, I found you on Google, which is great because I spend a lot of time making sure that I show up there. And secondarily, it's different, right? This is different. You're not a typical, shall I say, Romanian photographer, whatever that's supposed to mean. So it sort of worked out as an advantage. And since then, my portfolio has become a lot stronger. Plus, I have my much better studio space and conditions now than I had way back then. So it's become much better.
Yeah, and I think because you work for a reasonable price, but with high quality, it's like perfect.
Yeah, and actually that was funny you mentioned that, because actually I didn't know what to charge when I came to Romania, right? So I would think I was charging like 50 lei or like 100 lei for a whole event back then. Well, okay, it was 10 years ago. So sure, that was a bit more, it was worth a bit more to them at that point, but I didn't know what to charge. And actually I learned something very early on is that if you offer your services for free, people are even more suspicious of you than if you're asking money from them. So, I was trying to do some free sessions to help build my portfolio, and people were looking at me like, why is this guy offering to take pictures for me for free? What's in it for him, sort of thing. And there was a sense of skepticism, so I had to put prices on my work. Not just because it costs an absolute fortune to be a photographer and have the studio space and everything like this, but also it applies value to what you have to do. But I want to make my services affordable. And I'm registered here as a business. I know there's a lot of photographers that don't go through the hassle of registering in their business, but as a foreign person here, I believe it's right to respect the rules. And so, having the business means I have to pay tax, so I have to charge something. But the prices, I like to keep them reasonable, because after all, this is more of a passion for me than it is a source of income.
Yeah.
So.
What are the dark and bright sides of photography?
So there are many bright sides. Obviously, the sort of access you get to to events has been incredible. I never thought for 1 minute. So it was last year, so 2022. I was invited to take pictures at an event. That event was the Duke of Edinburgh International Award. Now that's obviously Duke of Edinburgh is an English royal family member. At the time, the world was going through a lot of change post-pandemic, and I was invited to this event. And I ended up taking pictures of Prince Edward, which was crazy to me, because Prince Edward is the late Queen's youngest son.
Are you kidding me?
No, they're on my website. I have the portfolio. I just never thought for a minute that I would actually be taking pictures of the members of the royal family from the UK in Romania, right? So I'm far from home, but here I am. I've never been closer to my British roots than I suppose ever. And those pictures, they ended up getting published on royal.uk, which of course is the royal household's website. So that's the sort of access and event that I think, you could never dream of doing something that high profile. That's not to mention the festivals that I've taken pictures of and the celebrities that have come with that. And just to say as well, joining His Royal Highness Prince Edward at that event was Princess Margareta and Prince Radu. So I also have taken pictures of them, and also Prince of Luxembourg, all at the same event. So that was really quite phenomenal.
That's sensational, yeah.
So, that's certainly some of the bright sides. Other bright sides are knowing that you're capturing a moment of somebody's life, whether it be in a studio, outside, or wherever. That moment is frozen in time, and because now we're living in the age of digital media, knowing that image could effectively last forever, just freezing that moment and giving that to them is amazing. And they do really treasure those pictures, right? A lot of these pictures, seeing them light up and be happy and excited about the results is always a reinforcement of why I do what I do. Now, there are some dark sides, right? You asked if there are dark sides. Yes, there can be. There is sometimes quite a lot of competition in the field, right? There's a lot of people that are budding photographers, a lot of people that are established photographers, and there can be a sense of intimidation by someone who maybe has a competitive edge or is different in some way. And so I faced quite a bit of that initially, where I was sort of not pushed aside, right? Because that's not quite the right word, but people made attempts to, maybe damage my reputation by saying things or, suggesting things that aren't true. So again, an example of this would have been back in Tugomorish, where someone behind a fake Facebook account made up something and published it in a Facebook group about, she didn't say that directly about me, but they were very much implying it because they were like, photographer whose initials are RLA. Come on. That's obvious me.
Yeah.
does takes pictures for favors if you catch the drift. Now that's
Oh,
not
God.
true. So I was actually told about this by some of the models that I had worked with. They told me about this because I wasn't paying attention to it. They posted it. They took me a screenshot. They said, "Hey, this is going on." I'm like, "Oh, what the heck?" And the nice thing is, and what I actually really appreciated about that is the people that defended me were the people that where he was suggesting I was getting favors from.
Oh my God.
Or she. Sorry, I'm making an assumption that it was a. I have no idea who that person is even to that day, but their Facebook account, I did pipe up and I commented on that and I was like, yeah, go ahead. Give me some examples of what you're talking about because this is news to me, you know. And so that's a risk, yeah. There's a risk there.
All publicity is good publicity, no?
Yeah. I mean, as long as it can be proved otherwise, and thankfully in my case, I was able to prove that this guy was just talking junk, right?
Oh my
or this girl, sorry. I gotta be balanced with it. It could be anyone. I have the impression, and I'll tell you where my impression comes from, it being a guy. It's that sense of intimidation, right? There's a lot of people, you know, great people, wonderful looking people reaching out to me for pictures, and I guess in a way somebody who may have the wrong intentions behind their photography might have taken that as a challenge to work with. That's pretty much it. There's not too many other dark sides. I mean, there's obviously the expense. You know, some of these lenses are multiple thousands of euros, let alone you know, the in RON, right? Those numbers are big in euros, let alone in the Romanian lei. So, that's a big thing. And trying to offset that cost to the result. Sometimes there's a high sense of you really do need to make some of this. You've got to make this equipment work for you, and you've got to find a lot of work to pay that off. There's a sense of pressure sometimes around that, and I think that pressure really comes from my desire to deliver, you know, excellent results, right? I don't want the pictures to be bad. Like I told you, the wedding I did in the UK, I had a nightmare the night before, right? The pressure that I feel to make sure the results are excellent it is incredible, and it can take a toll. Sometimes you just want to say, okay, I'm not doing any more work for the rest of this month. That was enough. It's exhausting mentally sometimes.
Yeah. If you strive for perfectionism, yeah, it can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Art means something different to everyone. How do you define art in photography?
So there's, like I said, there's the technical aspects, composition, lighting techniques, choosing the subjects and how you then, because let's be honest, everybody edits pictures these days.
Yeah.
There's no such thing in 2023 as perfect in the camera, right? I mean, it looks good in the camera, but it can be made perfect in post-production. So for me, art, the term art when it comes to photography is making sure that what you're taking the picture of is interesting. It's going to catch somebody's eye, and then using the tools around you. That can be the camera itself. It can be the lights that you have access to, or the lenses you're using, or the technique, as well as the software to then create a final result that doesn't just catch somebody's attention, it stands out. And so I was in New York this year, and that was my first time in New York, and I was there on my own, and I don't drive, so needless to say, I walked a lot.
Yeah.
And I took some trips to the top of the World Trade Center, top of the Rockefeller Center, Empire State Building to get some pictures off of there. And I was very focused on getting the shots that I think could easily be printed out on large format canvas and put on a wall and somebody would enjoy it. Is it art? Art for me is painting, right? And I don't understand painting.
If you think it is art, then
So art is if somebody is willing to spend a bit of time and look at it and go, yeah, that's awesome, wow, they may look at it and see it completely differently from me. I see the technical aspects of my composition, right? And I go, okay, I like that this was a long exposure. You see the light trails from the, and I'm actually looking at these pictures on my wallpaper right now. So I'm looking at the pictures as we speak. I'm not, the light trails going across the Brooklyn Bridge, or, the warm contrast of the lights versus the cold sky. Like, it's composition for me. That is art. That's the art part. Now, when it comes to people, it's so much difficult because you're talking about a person, right? So everybody's art in their own way, right? Everybody's unique. Everybody is different. Every way you take a picture of them can give a completely different impression. So working with lighting and working with like a mood and a theme is how you create art from photo sessions, right? With people. And but at the end of the day, if one person calls it art and the others don't, it's still art to somebody.
Yeah. Art is like different for everyone.
Yeah.
What are your future professional plans?
Yes, so that's a great question, and it couldn't have come at a better time. So right now, obviously, the world is in a very strange place. We have all sorts of crazy things happening in and around us, and I'm also going through some changes myself, right? So there's going to be a slight career change for me in my actual professional career that I work at as a company here in Cluj. So that may factor very much into what my decisions are for the future. But I think for me, and from a photography, professional plan, it's going to be to continue to grow what I've already got. I think I'm in a pretty stable position in terms of the sorts of services that I offer and what's being offered in those services and the results that are coming from it. And so I think that getting access to more events is always going to be a nice high priority. But I think I'd like to travel a bit. There's a part of me that really wants to travel and see different cultures and photograph and break out of my comfort zone, because like I said, being British and studying media, there's a sense of uncertainty or even discomfort in taking pictures of people in public places, especially if those people don't know you're taking a picture of them, right? So street photography is something it gets a lot of attention and it's really nice, but there's something in me, in a foundation of me, that just feels difficult taking pictures of someone who doesn't know I'm there to take a picture of them, right? There are a lot of photographers that see past that, and I think I'd like to get into that more. And I think as well, there's such a strain right now on people's sense of self and their self-image, right? Social media has been both a blessing and a curse, right, with affecting people's mental health. Yeah, I mean, if you think about Instagram and what you're seeing on Instagram as, Facebook and other social media websites, it's an image of what people want to be, right? A lot of the time. It's not always who they are, not exactly their life. And as a photographer, I don't edit my images beyond what is, real. I don't remove, objects from people's bodies, right? If they have a blemish because they had a spot or something on their face, sure, I'll get rid of that. But if somebody says, can you reshape my nose? Can you change the height of my, my shoulders? Or can you, edit my hair and go beyond what is real? I just refuse to do it. I actually say that, I do non-destructive editing. So I think what I want to do is start getting people to feel more comfortable in their skin, and taking pictures, I think maybe even of younger people that have such a hard time with their personal self-image, to take a picture of them and say, look, this is how you look and you look amazing. So build that sense of self-confidence through my work. So yeah, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that yet, but I think bringing things back to reality and say, no, this is who you are, and I think it's great. I think that's sort of a theme I want to try and do. I certainly don't want to go down the route of editing images beyond what is who's actually in front of me, right? So, especially with AI. AI is making it, and I use AI for images, repairing, maybe something that was in the way, fine. But editing beyond recognition, changing people's features. Nope. That is something I'll never do.
Yeah, and on social media, everyone is posting their best pictures, their best moments, so it's kind of an illusion.
Right, and I think what I want to do is make sure that I'm capturing their best, right? Capturing, not creating.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's for the future, it's going to be a focus on that and trying to help people realize that you don't need to go through this. You're amazing how you are. Don't throw this through a filter. Don't, re-sculpt your this, that, and the other just to publish it on social media. It would offend me if somebody did that, right? So trying to get that message across is important for me.
And to be honest and authentic, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation, and I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Pleasure is mine. No problem at all.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and I was able to give you a quality content about a very talented photographer. Please join us next time as well. Have a nice day.